My name is Jonathan Reeves, and if you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, trembling as I tell you this story, I would have laughed it off. I'm a 54-year-old from St. Paul, Minnesota, born and raised just miles from where Prince first walked the streets, long before the world knew his name. His music was the background of my youth, his guitar solos cutting through summer nights, his voice echoing from open car windows, his lyrics sparking debates at school dances. My mother loved his ballads, my friends worshipped his funk, and I, somewhere in the middle, learned to admire him without fully understanding the man. Faith was a part of my life from the start, but not the anchor it should have been. I was raised in a small Pentecostal church where the choir could make the rafters shake, but somewhere along the way I let the world's noise drown out the voice of God. I prayed when I was in trouble, worshipped when it was convenient, and convinced myself that grace would always excuse the compromises I refused to let go of. On April 21, 2023, the anniversary of Prince's death, I woke up with an unshakable heaviness. I had a cardiology appointment that day, nothing urgent, just a follow-up. I remember the sterile smell of the clinic, the cold stethoscope on my chest, the doctor's calm tone as he ordered a quick EKG. And then it hit, a crushing, stabbing pain like a fist closing around my heart. The nurse's voice warped into echoes, the lights dimmed, and a deep roar filled my ears. They told me later my heart stopped for nearly 11 minutes. But in those minutes, I wasn't gone. I was somewhere else, somewhere far more real than this world. A place where every belief I'd ever claimed was tested in the fire. And before the light came, before the music, there was only the darkness. The darkness was not the kind you find in a closed room or on a moonless night. This darkness felt alive, thick, pressing against my skin like a living thing that wanted me to know it had me. I couldn't tell if I was falling or floating, but there was motion, slow at first and then accelerating. A low hum surrendered me, growing louder until it became a chorus of groans, cries, and wails, lured so densely that my mind struggled to separate one voice from another. When my feet finally touched ground, I wished they hadn't. The earth beneath me was not earth at all, but a brittle, blackened surface that cracked under my weight, glowing faintly with red veins of heat like cooling lava. Each step sent up bursts of foul-smelling steam that burned my throat and stung my eyes. I realized there was no horizon, no sun, no moon, only the oppressive ceiling of a vast cavern, dripping with a thick, tar-like moisture that hissed when it landed on the ground. Shapes moved in the distance, some shambling slowly, others darting like predators. I thought they might be animals until I saw their faces, human, but twisted. One man's mouth was stretched unnaturally wide, screaming in a soundless agony. A woman's eyes were hollow sockets, yet her head turned toward me as though she could still see. Then I saw people I knew. An old friend from youth group, the one who used to joke about holiness being outdated. My cousin, who had once promised to come to church with me but never did, dying from an overdose years later. Their eyes recognized me. They didn't speak, but their faces begged for something, mercy, release, anything. I couldn't move toward them. Some invisible force held me where I stood. All around, strange punishments unfolded. A man was bound to a giant pendulum that swung back and forth, each pass striking him with a sickening thud, the rhythm matching the beat of a song he once led in church but later corrupted for the world stage. A woman was submerged waist-deep in a pool of molten metal, her hands raised as if leading worship, but when she opened her mouth to sing, only the sound of boiling rose from her throat. The smell was a choking mix of sulfur, rotting flesh, and something metallic. Heat and cold fought for dominance in the air. My skin burned, yet a chill worked its way into my bones. Above the noise, A single verse echoed in my mind, though I hadn't thought of it in years. And they will be thrown into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 13 verse 50. It wasn't a voice speaking to me, it was truth searing itself into my soul. Somewhere deeper in the cavern, I felt a pull, not from chains but from something heavier, the weight of my own compromises, my half-hearted faith, every time I'd sung to God while the glow grew stronger, not like the harsh blaze of the molten rivers but warm, almost golden. It felt out of place in this cavern of agony, yet it didn't fight against the darkness. It simply existed, unshaken. As it drew nearer, the voices around me seemed to hush, as though even the tormented knew they couldn't compete with what was coming. And then I saw him. It was Prince. Not the Prince from the posters or the Super Bowl halftime show. He wore no sequins, no makeup, no guitar slung across his shoulder. Instead, he was clothed in a flowing robe of light that shifted between shades of deep violet and pure white. His eyes were piercing, yet gentle, the kind that saw everything at once and still chose to look deeper. "Jonathan," he said, and my name in his mouth felt like a calling. My knees buckled, and I sank to the ground without thinking. "You don't have much time. I asked for this moment, for you." My mind was spinning. "For me? Why? How are you here?" He glanced around at the writhing shadows. "Not every messenger comes from where you think. Sometimes the Father allows us to step into places we've been rescued from, to warn those who still breathe." I could feel my pulse in my ears. "Warn me about what?" His voice lowered, but the words struck like thunder. "Tell them before the door closes." "Tell who?" "Christians. The ones who clap their hands but never open their hearts. The ones who know the lyrics but not the word. The ones who think standing in a church makes them safe, yet they live for the same idols they claim to have left behind." His face tightened, and a flash of pain crossed his features. "I was one of them. My stage became my altar. My fans became my congregation. And while I sang about love, I ignored the one who is love." He stepped closer, and I felt both drawn and exposed. "Jonathan, there is an ambush coming. Not with weapons you can see, but with a deception so sweet that many will swallow it whole. It will be in the songs they sing, the sermons they hear, the things they watch when they're alone. It will feel harmless, even holy, but it will lead them here." A deep rumble shook the ground, and I saw figures gathering in the shadows, twisted faces I recognized from the darker parts of my own past. People I had envied, emulated, or excused, all of them now bound in chains of their own choices. Prince continued. I begged him for the chance to speak, to say what I could not say when I walked the earth. "Jonathan, you have breath. That makes you dangerous to the darkness. Use it. Tell them that the door is closing, and once it shuts, no one can open it." His hand touched my forehead, and images exploded in my mind. Churches filled with worship that never reached heaven, preachers speaking words that tickled ears while demons feasted unseen, believers with Bibles in their hands but dust in their souls. Tears streamed down my face. "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you will tell it without polishing it," he said. "You will tell it as it is, even if they mock you. And when you speak, some will hear the music they forgot, the song of the shepherd calling them home." The glow around him began to fade, and the darkness crept closer again. "Remember," he said one last time, "I am not the point. He is. And he is coming soon." The cavern shook violently, and the ground beneath me gave way. I was falling again, but now the glow was above me, and the cries of the damned were fading. And then I saw a light brighter than any I had ever known, keeping my heart elsewhere. It dragged me forward until the shadows ahead began to part, revealing a glow unlike the fire around me. From within that glow came a voice, smooth, melodic, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. It didn't belong in this place, yet it carried through the darkness with authority. I turned toward it, and what I saw next shattered everything I thought I knew about life, death, and eternity. The light engulfed me so completely that for a moment I forgot where I had been. It wasn't like stepping into sunshine, it was like the light was alive, flowing over me, through me, peeling away every shadow that had clung to my soul. My fear dissolved, replaced by a peace so deep it felt infinite. Then I saw him. Jesus stood before me, not as an image I had seen in paintings, but as the fullness of glory, his face brighter than the morning star, his eyes like endless oceans of love and truth. Every part of me wanted to collapse, yet his gaze held me upright. "My child," he said, and my heart broke at the sound of his voice, "I have heard your prayers, even the ones you thought were too shallow to matter. I have seen the lines you would not cross and the ones you did. And still, I have called you." I wanted to speak, to confess everything, but he lifted his hand and the weight of my guilt vanished. "You were shown what you were shown so you might carry my warning. Do not let fear seal your lips. Tell them of the narrow way, and tell them I am the door." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed, tears soaking the ground. The memory of hell was still fresh, but in his presence, it had no power over me. His light filled every corner of my being, and anew, I could never go back to the life I had before. The moment his light began to fade, I felt myself being pulled backward, as if the very air was reeling me in. My chest heaved, and the next thing I knew, my eyes shot open to a blinding white light overhead, fluorescent hospital lights, sterile and cold. The sound of monitors beeping filled my ears, and a nurse was shouting for a doctor. I had returned, but something in me knew I could never be the same. The weight of Prince's warning and the fire in Jesus' words burned in me like a brand. For a few moments, I couldn't move. My body felt foreign, heavy, like it didn't quite fit me anymore. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the enormity of what I now carried. In the days that followed, the struggle began. Every ordinary moment felt strange. The taste of coffee, the hum of a television, the idle chatter of neighbors. I would hear someone laughing and wonder if they knew how close eternity was. I would pass a church and question if the people inside were truly awake or just going through the motions. But the hardest battle was inside me. Old habits whispered for me to slip back into comfort. Old fears told me to keep silent, that people would call me crazy, accuse me of making it all up for attention. The enemy didn't come with horns and fire this time. He came in the form of self-doubt, distraction, and the lure of staying quiet. Every night, when I closed my eyes, I saw the faces from the cavern. Some I recognized, others I didn't, but their eyes followed me. And then I would hear Prince's voice again, "Tell them before the door closes." It wasn't just a memory, it was a commission. I opened my Bible more in those first 2 weeks than I had in the previous 2 years. Passages leapt off the page with new life. "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." Ephesians 5 verse 14. No longer sounded poetic, it was urgent. Yet even as my spirit awakened, I felt the pull of my old life. I realized that awakening is not a one-time event, it's a daily choice. And each day, I had to decide if I would be the man who came back from death with a testimony, or the man who let it fade into a strange, distant dream. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I stood alone in my living room, Bible in one hand, journal in the other. I had written pages of what I saw, the cavern, the faces, Prince's words, and the overwhelming light of Jesus. Reading it back, it didn't feel like my handwriting. It was as though someone had guided my hand, impressing each detail into permanence. I realized then that keeping this to myself would be disobedience. It wasn't a story for my comfort. It was a warning, a call to urgency, a spark meant to ignite others before time ran out. I began small. One phone call to a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, telling him about my experience. His silence on the other end was heavy, but when he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I've been drifting, John. I needed to hear this." That was confirmation enough. From there, I started meeting people over coffee, sharing what I had seen. Some listened with tears, others with skepticism. But no matter the response, I spoke anyway. I knew I wasn't responsible for their reaction, only for delivering the message. I prayed daily for courage. Each time doubt tried to creep in, I remembered the verse Jesus had spoken into my heart, "I am the door." If he was the door, then my job was simply to point people toward him before it closed. And so, my quest began, not to build a platform, but to rescue as many as I could from the sleep that leads to destruction. I understood now that warning someone about hell was not cruelty. It was love. Silence, in the face of what I had seen, would be the real cruelty. Months have passed since that day in the clinic, yet I still wake up with the same awareness I felt when I first opened my eyes in the hospital. The air seems sharper, conversations feel heavier, and every moment feels like it matters in ways I never saw before. I no longer drift through my days. I walk them with intention, knowing that eternity is not some distant horizon but a heartbeat away. I've spoken in small churches, living rooms, even park benches to strangers who didn't expect a divine appointment. Some listen in silence, some weep openly, and some walk away shaking their heads. But I've learned my job isn't to convince, it's to witness. Jesus didn't send me back to win arguments, he sent me back to be faithful. I think often about Prince's face, the way his eyes carried both the weight of his past and the light of redemption. His words, "Tell them before the door closes," still echo in me like a sacred rhythm I can't ignore. I now understand that the door is not just the end of life, but the moment a heart stops listening to the voice of God. That door can shut long before the body dies. There are days when I feel tired, when the weight of carrying this vision feels heavier than my strength. But then I remember the faces in that cavern, reaching toward me with silent pleas. I remember Jesus' eyes, burning with a love that refuses to give up on even the hardest heart. And I remember my own rescue, undeserved, unearned, but freely given. I've surrendered the rest of my life to this mission. My prayers have changed. They are no longer about comfort or success, but about readiness. Lord, make me ready to speak, to go, to give, to stand, even if it costs me everything. The man who walked into that clinic on April 21, 2023, died on that table. The man who walked out is living on borrowed breath. And every inhale is a chance to warn, to love, to point toward the door. If you are hearing my voice right now, it is not by accident. The same God who allowed me to see the reality of hell and the beauty of his light has allowed you to hear this. Do not wait. Do not gamble with the time you think you have. Because the door is still open. But it will not be forever.